Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be having a look at three things. I'm going to be installing the luggage bins for the final time, so I'll have a quick look at that, which involves getting my ECU in position. We'll also be fabricating a bracket to hold the map sensors on my engine. So we do a little bit of milling to make a billet bracket for that one. And the third and probably most important thing is we're going to be installing the fire system in the car. And plumbing it to the back. You can see here, this is the original system that I bought, a FireSense system. It was going to do the job, but the downside of it was that the extinguishant used in these particular systems, the powder type extinguishant, is highly corrosive. So if you do follow a few Ultima builds, you'll no doubt have run into Will in the US, who runs a YouTube channel, Driver Driven, who unfortunately had to use his fire system in his Ultima. In rebuilding it, you'll also note that he's had to clean up quite a bit of the chassis and a lot of the hard work that he's done in the past because of the corrosion that's caused by these systems. It pretty much gets everywhere and it is a pain. I wasn't aware of the advantages or disadvantages or even different types of systems with fire extinguishers up until I was contacted by a guy in Sydney, Tony from Motorsport Race Gear, really good guy, and he explained to me that there are different systems which run on a Novec type extinguishant as distinct from these powder types. They are more expensive. You're sort of looking at, this was $600 or $700, and I think I paid sort of $1,200 or $1,400 for the Novec type system. But this one here runs an extinguishant that I think is actually water-based. It's non-corrosive, doesn't harm electricals, and a whole heap of other things. So if you do have to set it off, it is not going to be as painful in the long term, and it'll still do the job of saving your car. So they are the two main things that were sort of important to me. There is obviously the standard FIA requirements or whoever your governing body is to run these in cars so that you can look after occupants. But given the amount of time that I put into building my cars and building any car, I am sort of very, very keen to make sure that I protect it if it does throw a rod and start an oil fire or something like that that's completely unforeseen and unfortunately is the reality of cars building and racing. So anyhow, that's it. There are obviously a few different things, like there's different types of nozzles and stuff. This one here is an in-cabin one. There's other ones that are multi-direction ones that fit in your cabin. It's important really just to make sure that you position them to I guess, be proximate to where you're likely to have a fire. Say for me, I've got a fuel tank on either side and we've got the hot exhaust, so they're going to be the logical places. And in the cabin, you need to make sure that it's going to be positioned so that it keeps you safe whilst you get out of the car. Anyhow, look, that's the basis for it. As I say, if you are looking for a fire system, Tony at Motorsport Race Gear reached out to me and explained the differences, and he got a sale out of it, and he's certainly a good guy to chat to that was plenty knowledgeable, so thank you for that. Otherwise, it's just a matter of running these lines. They're sort of they seem to be sort of an aluminium or stainless steel line that's just sheathed in some sort of hard plastic, and they're just a push type fitting. So it should be relatively easy to deal with that otherwise, but we'll run over that, or you'll see that sort of go together as we work through it. Anyhow, thanks very much for watching. As always, leave some comments, questions, whatever, and I'll try and tend to them as best I can, or answer them if I can. Otherwise, you can follow along on Instagram, 105 Motorsport. Otherwise, thanks very much. Okay, so we've got our bottle here, and I know because I had the seat in here before that this is going to fit, and what we need to do is we need to connect this through the firewall somehow and get it into the engine bay so that we can get the extinguishing out. Now, what your kit will always come with will be a number of reducers. There's usually a bulkhead fitting, so if you just had a standard car and you're going to run it straight through the bulkhead like we could here and then just tee off out in the engine bay, that's one option. What I'll do is, because I want this all to be relatively inconspicuous, is I'm going to have the bottle here, I'm going to plumb it through the side panel here and then bend it around into the engine bay. Now this sort of material here, I don't know whether that'll focus on it, you can see that what you need to be careful of is when you're bending it, just maintaining a reasonable bend radius so that you don't kink the line. Usually when you're bending any sort of hard pipe that's copper, aluminium or anything like that, what you can do is you can get what they call bending springs, and you feed that down through the inside of the tube, and then when you bend it, the spring, if you think about the coils in the spring, will actually stop the wall from collapsing and sort of kinking. I don't have that. If you know anyone that works in air conditioning, they usually have a range of them, so they'll probably be able to look after you. So I'm just going to do that very carefully. The other thing which I forgot to mention before with this, Novec is actually recoverable. So when you service these systems, I think you actually lose a lot of the extinguishant, or you have to get rid of it when you do that with the powder type. So you have to pay for all the extinguishant again. Whereas with the Novec systems, you actually buy the extinguisher, and when they actually service the bottle and pressure test it and make sure it's not leaking, all that sort of stuff, as you typically have to do with the regulations, you get the Novec out of this, you store it, there's a minimal amount lost. Then what they'll do is they'll pressure test everything, put a new seal in the bottle, whatever, and then you'll just return the Novec back into the bottle with a slight top up and move on with life. That's actually a far cheaper maintenance item than these, but obviously this being half the price, short-term gains, long-term gains, just something to be aware of. Anyhow, look, you'll see me install this now. These fittings obviously are just a push type, so I'm reluctant to push this in because I know what will happen is it won't want to come back out. But you basically just feed them in the correct size. You'll hear it click, and then if you need to release it, you can see there's a little collar there. You actually just, I think, push the collar in and push this in, and then it just pulls back out. It's like a shark bite type fitting. I can't really show you there how that operates, but look, fairly simple. If you've done any pneumatics or anything like that in the past, you'll be very familiar with these. Even guys who do stuff with fish tanks usually use these type of systems. And we can see here that there's a number of nozzles. This is the engine bay type, and the nozzles here in the instruction manual have to be all at the top there, as distinct from upside down like that. The cabin one has a similar type of arrangement. I'm probably not going to install the cabin one initially. The chance of getting fire into the cabin with this car is probably fairly low relative to most other vehicles. If I decide to race this though, it's fairly easy for me to install a cabin one. What I'm going to do is focus most of the extinguishing into the engine bay to try and save the car if there is an issue. With the sizing, this is actually what they use in Australian V8 supercars, which to me suggests that it's probably adequate, but also as lightweight as you'd want to go. You can get larger systems, smaller systems, depending on what type of car you're using. For this one, the reason this one's so large is I just purchased, not knowing much about them, the largest bottles that I could physically fit behind the passenger's seat in the vehicle on the premise that more extinguishing is better than less. One thing with your handheld extinguishers that people aren't sort of aware of is that they don't last very long. So if you do have just a standard floor mounted extinguisher and you're doing track days, just be aware that you kind of get one shot at having a go at the fire, and you need to be relatively close and make sure you aim it very much so at the fire source, at the base of the fire. So if you are using one of those and you're not too experienced with them, it is worthwhile being aware of that. You can also find that you have lots of guys who will install these in their car and they forget to get them charged. I do know of cars that have actually burnt to the ground because guys thought the fire system was charged, and unfortunately when they go to pull the panic trigger, nothing happens and they watch their pride and joy burn to the ground. So just be aware of that. Otherwise it's fairly simple stuff. And here's the left-hand side luggage box in place. We can see that I've carpet lined that. I've also got 2 layers of sound insulation and the carpet on the left-hand side. I didn't need anything more than the carpet on that side because I've got the insulation, the heavy insulation on the coolant pipes. And I've just put the double layer foam, double density foam on the front and the rear, just adjacent these pull cables, which will hopefully shut things up. That's how you open and shut the front clam, and same on the back for the rear clam. I'll show you the other one on the other side once it's installed, and it'll just give you an idea of how I'm going to mount the ECU and run the cables there. And we can see here's the finished map sensor bracket. So you can see that sits there at the front there. I can feed the wiring loom through the guide plates here at the front and just loop the wiring loom around there to get onto the injector loom. So I can feed that through in one point. Normally what you do with this is it'd be nice just to have an Autosport connector or something like that at the front here, just so when you want to pull the motor you can just unplug it at one point. It's very quick to move it in and out, but look, they're quite expensive and it's probably beyond the needs for me. I'm not racing and going to be doing engine swaps in 5 minutes to stick in a new one or anything like that, but it is something worthwhile thinking about if you are going to need serviceability in the future. Again, you can see the tail for the fire extinguisher just poking out there once it comes past the luggage bin, which is
now installed. We can see that it's just lined there, and those carbon fiber tubes for any future proofings worked out quite well. Also got my ECU mounted up the front here. Sorry the light's not that great. I've just run a simple sort of clamp arrangement there with a couple of rib nuts just to hold in the side, and there are the 4 grommets to accept the wiring loom once it goes in. So that's basically it for today. Sorry I don't have too much more time to keep on kicking on. I'm actually running late for my own wedding, so I'm getting yelled at and better get my act together. Anyhow, thanks very much, and until next time, look after yourself.